The Cyber Minutes podcast is for educational purposes only. The views expressed by hosts and guests are their own, not necessarily their employers. Advice discussed is general advice. We promote ethical discussions, not illegal activities. Listen responsibly. Well, good day, everyone, and welcome back to the Cyber Minutes podcast. My name is Max, and I'm joined by Flynn. And again, our special guest, Kirwin, has returned. So welcome back, Kirwin. Great to have you on.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be back.
Yeah.
Being here again.
So we thought we'd just sort of, while you're here, we'd hit the nail right on the head and talk about something that we've all discussed quite a bit, and we just want to hear your views on it a little bit as well, Kirwin. So where do you see the major threat to Australia's cybersecurity in the next sort of 5 to 10 years? Like, what particular industries do you think are going to be hit the most or targeted the most? What do you think?
That is a great question. We've already seen a few recent events that I think perfectly demonstrates like the vulnerabilities that we already face or the potential issues that I can't remember. I think it was like Shipping World or something. I can't remember. DP World. That's
we discussed it on earlier episodes.
Oh, did you? Okay, well, I'll leave that. But that cost.
Oh no! I mean, we were only surface level with that as well because we were.
It was
going.
It was like the day before that it happened, before we recorded the podcast. So that was still before all of the information came out.
I think it was 40% of imports or exports, or was it both?
40% of imports exports.
40%.
That's insane.
I think all stuff coming into the country stopped.
Yeah, and that was, I think it was just a ransomware, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was for a few days, and it cost millions of dollars in damages.
Because we were worried that it was going to increase Christmas shopping prices, which didn't seem to happen, thankfully.
No, didn't really seem.
Well, from what we know, who knows about the analytics and the statistics, but
nothing seemed like egregiously expensive.
So
ports.
If we look at what's happened previously, like if you look at the Colonial Pipeline attack that happened on the east coast of the US, like that kind of critical infrastructure, which denied like entire motorways from fueling, like they couldn't fuel jets, they couldn't fuel planes, like there was so much different like infrastructure and industries that were impacted from that, and that was just from one thing, right? And that I can elaborate. I did like a whole white paper on that, but there's so many different industries that like aren't prepared to be targeted. And I think one of the biggest industries in Australia, for example, is the mining industry.
Mining. Yeah.
If that gets impacted, like I don't think we'll be able to recover them very easily or very quickly, depending on how long they've been ransomware or depending. Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
Like they're heavily reliant on those systems. In fact, like it'll impact people's lives and put people at jeopardy.
Yeah.
And so
kind of think of all the machinery that it's not going to be
potentially dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely
dangerous. But I was going to say as well, it's probably a lot of it isn't brand new or up to date.
It's probably all the riddled.
Yeah, riddled with old vulnerabilities. So yeah, I hadn't even thought about that.
Something I think that a trend we often see is that we see basically what you said. There's an industry that's not prepared for it, and then when that gets hit, that industry inevitably, kind of all shits themselves and they make the security better. We saw it originally with the hospitals. We had the WannaCry stuff in the UK where hospitals were just like disgustingly insecure, and that happened. And, that was one of the worst in history.
MS-17, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, legal firms, I've been hearing a lot that a lot of them are really scared right now. They're trying to get ahead of the curve.
Well, yeah. I meant because they would be especially at risk because of their clients. I feel like they're the type of clients that would sue them for that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's directly legal adjacent, but we saw the Victoria court breach. When I saw that, I thought it was a really big worry because, court breaches, depending on the time, it could be very, state-sponsored, somebody's targeting a specific case. Didn't look like it. It looked like it was just a typical run-of-the-mill ransomware.
It's funny, like, it's difficult because cyber is one of those things that those are the noisy ones. Like ransomware is like you will always know when you've been. That's the point. Operators that are good at their job, like APT, Advanced Persistent Threats, state-sponsored groups. Like we've seen this time and time again. Like if you look at, for example, SolarWinds, they were vulnerable. They were hacked for months. So I think the typical dwell time, I'm trying to remember, is like between. Yeah. I've seen like 40 to 80 days between that range. I know it's a very wide range, but that's the average dwell time, and that's with like most. I'd wager like 70 to 80% of most attackers are sophisticated. They're running known tools, known exploits, known scripts, and they're getting wins when they really shouldn't be.
Yeah.
A talented group, like an organized, like I'm going to call it organized crime because that's truly what it is. You won't know when you've been hacked. By the time you do know, they've been there for months. They've gotten what they need, right? So, like, I'll paint you a picture because I've seen this time and time again. Like, we're not a blue teamers. We don't do instant response, but sometimes when we get brought in to do testing and say we get a shell, we'll look at logs. We're curious because if we got a shell on a machine, someone else probably has too. So we check afterwards, and when we do that kind of work as well. Obviously, it's like different contracting and it takes a long time to do it, but like we do that.
Yep.
And we've seen that there's not just one or two hackers on a machine. Like we see like upwards of like 10 different people like using this. Like, so it's really weird. It's like honor amongst thieves. Like they'll have like one account that they might all just use, and it's like really, really cheeky. But what we see constant machines with it's called like XMP. I think it might be XMP miners. They're like Monero miners, right? Yeah. A good hack, you won't know you've been hacked if it's a good hacker.
And that comes back to what we said in the previous episode, where knowing your information assets and knowing who your attacker could be is really valuable in that case, because Flower Store's probably not going to have a Russian APT on their door, but a life insurance company,
you can assume that an APT is going to spend a lot more time in the reconnaissance phase, sitting around, slowly poking things, sitting under the radar, making sure that everything that they're doing just looks perfectly normal.
Yep.
When in reality, they're probing all the areas of your organization, your network, your systems, applications, everything, to learn as much about your organization as they can before, finding something. And like you said before on our last episode, if you have a big organization with thousands of assets, lots of applications, and they can only really look at so much, there is going to be something they will find that they will be able to get in.
Absolutely. And look at SolarWinds, for example.
Yeah.
SolarWinds, they didn't even target one company. Like they took it a step further. So this was, I think it was Cozy Bear was the code name, or like APT29. Yeah, I think it might be APT29.
Yeah.
Cozy Bear. They... Obviously, I'm not a malicious person. I'm a white hat hacker. I'm reformed. I jest. But I really, there's a certain beauty in hacking. I really admire like this campaign. So what they did was, do you know how SolarWinds?
We studied it in uni, but I haven't looked at it probably in a good.
I consider myself read up on SolarWinds. So what had happened was they didn't target governments or NVIDIA or Samsung.
Oh, I do know this was the supply chain attack.
Exactly. Good man. They targeted an IT software solution called SolarWinds.
Yep.
And think of like SolarWinds like an equivalent of Kanji.
Okay.
You can manage devices, you can see endpoint health, so you can do system checks, you can read disks, you can see what people are doing, manage users, yada yada. So what they had done is they had breached the SolarWinds network, and they had sat there for months.
Yeah.
And they were slowly studying like the deployment pipelines, how they deploy code, what does typical behavior look like. They do that so they can obviously like mirror and mimic it and stay as quiet as possible. So eventually they pwned some developer account, right? And they got access to some developer system, and he has credentials there, so he's already assigned to GitHub.
Yep.
What they did is they didn't even put malicious code the first time they added I'm going to call it malware, because that's what it is. There's like an audit process, like there's DevSecOps that review code, so they have to be very smart about it. So they put dummy code in initially. I don't know what it does. I can't recall what it does. And so weeks later, what they had then done is that they had then did a pull request. They changed that dummy code to actual malicious code, but it was very, very well obfuscated. Like if you look at how do you know what like a C2 infrastructure is? Or command control infrastructure.
Yeah.
So they had very cleverly set up this. So you can do data exfiltration in very specific ways, and one of the ways that they had done that was through DNS records. So it's very lightweight, and you can't send much data, but like you can query commands like in responses like or wait, or even say like, hey, I'm now infected, I'm alive, and I'll ping back the master server. But the master server, obviously, the IP for that changes every single time. So what they had done, instead of having a static master server, they would do it through DNS records. So that way, it's very difficult to put your finger on what is the master server, what kind of information are they sending out, how what are they looking for, what are they listening for.
Yeah.
So anyway, so they've pwned SolarWinds at this point. They now have this very light malware setup. All it does is it listens and it queries for one file. So it's called a dropper. So it's like a staged malware, the staged payloads. So once they had deployed it to this product, obviously these governments and NVIDIA and Samsung, all these high-level governments, I know they're two separate companies, so also high-level governments, I think it was like Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and I can't recall the request, but this is American governments. All of these governments were using this product. What happened is they get the updates, right? And then the dropper will, every few weeks, so even I think it might have been days, not weeks, every few days, it would do a system check, like, are there certain antivirus solutions that are running? If it was something like, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but there was like 3 or 4 ones that it was okay with. If it saw in the system, it would try and disable it. But if it saw, I think it was 1 or 2 other solutions, if it saw like analyst, like sysinternal tools or like Wireshark, it would just drop, it would stop, it wouldn't run.
Yeah.
And it's very quiet in that sense. Like if someone was trying to look at what was happening and they use one of these tools, it would stay quiet. But for the system, and it would also check for like test system. Like it'll look at the system that's on. Am I a test system? Am I in like a test environment? Yep. And if it's not production, stay quiet.
Yep.
And it was very, very cleverly done. And over the course of months, companies were slowly starting to realize, like, I don't know initially how they realized this. I tried looking around I couldn't find anything on that, but it took months. By the time they realized, like, these hackers had been in every company for months already, had gotten terabytes of data.
Wow.
And what do you know?
That was spreading from big corporations to government agencies.
Exactly. It's a very real attack, very well, ethically executed.
Just for our listeners, I could not find a specific statistic on dormancy with ABTs, but the general consensus is months to years.
Yeah, they can spend a very long time.
Yeah,
be very sneaky.
Were you able to find the NIST?
There's some like papers on it, but it's 100 pages. But where could we find the white paper that you were talking about?
In fact, it's on my resume. No, I'll happily share this white paper. I have like the hash sum for all of the malware binaries and everything.
But dormancy capabilities, it's such an interesting thing. I mean, it may even have been part of the Colonial Pipeline and SolarWinds stuff, but I was talking recently about in a risk training session, I think it was Althea Blackhat, about how its dormancy capability, how it was like so crazy. It was a similar thing where it would probe for certain software and then basically shut itself down and just lay there and then come back up. Really interesting stuff.
We were going to have a chat a little bit before about cloud systems. And I had to stop you. I had to refrain you from taking because I wanted to chat about it here.
That's wrong. Yeah, this was a fun story. So there's something called the Spring Boot framework, and it is a Java-based framework. And there's, depending on how it's been configured, and if it has been misconfigured, there is a particular endpoint that will give the service heap dump. Now, what a heap dump is it's a snapshot of the system's memory, and it's done. And I don't know the actual file type for the heap dump. I think it's literally just .heapdump, but you need to use a specialized Java-based tool to actually reverse the heap dump so you can read the strings from it. Something like it's got the word sun in it. I can't remember what it is. There's actually, if you go to devon.com and you go / I use a different keyboard layout. Case studies. Oh, that's the New South Wales digital driver's license hack, which is done by Noah. If you want to look at a cool... So, do you guys use the digital driver's license app?
I do have it, but I don't use it at all. So I should probably just get rid of it. I completely forgot. That's one of the things with cybersecurity. Some people forget. Even I'm supposed to be an expert.
I can neither confirm nor deny. I use the digital.
Well, I'll be deleting it right after this.
Yeah, it's the blokes of the security firm over to Rome. They hacked it.
Yeah,
if you looked at it, you can
nothing safe.
Yeah, nothing. No, that was such a poor demonstration of like the New South Wales government's capacity. Like that was a multi-million-dollar application, and
yeah. I mean, we'll go into more later on about
right, the heap dump.
about how horrible Australia's.
Yeah, right. So we're looking at this one server, and obviously I can't say the company's name, but they had multiple of these servers. It was 3 of these servers with this particular misconfiguration. And we download this heap dump and reverse it, and now we can query for strings. And we're looking through this, and there's just already hundreds of credentials. Like I'm talking about SQL database keys. I'm talking about administrative passes, tokens, even like JWTs. But what my target was AWS IKEA keys. So at the beginning of every AWS private key, it starts with 4 characters, IKEA, AKIA. Now you can query for that, and you can look through the server's memory, and it's a bit annoying how it's done. Like the IKEA key is actually not the private key. That's the actual I think environment key. I don't know what it's called. I'm not too like I'm definitely not a AWS engineer, cloud is. I'm not a cloud engineer. And then you have to try and hunt the associated private key with that. So like some long randomly generated passphrase. Sometimes you can get lucky and they're together in this heap dump. But often you have to do a bit of hunting, so it's a bit of guessing.
Yep.
But what we then get is, so you grab these keys and then you pull up like a Docker container or a VM, whatever you want to do, or VPS. We typically do 95% of our hacking on a VPS for scans and stuff. Then we get these keys, whip up, it's a tool called Scout Suite. Love that tool, fantastic for anything cloud related. It does multiple different environments, Azure, GCP, AWS, and I think it does, what is it? Alibaba? Is it Alibaba? Yeah, I think it's Alibaba. Yeah. We check these keys in, and then we can see it like, oh, these keys are valid. So we've validated, I now have 3 sets of different keys. For this, it's just for S3 buckets.
Yeah.
Now, guess how many S3 buckets we now have complete and utter access to? They're non-encrypted, don't require any additional authentication to access or read or dump. Just have a guess of how many buckets we had found, and just 1 set of keys.
One. If it's I've actually heard this story before, so I can't comment. I'd be giving it away.
I'll take a guess. Say you said it's like, was it medium, large, enterprise?
Large.
Probably.
I think it's called, simple storage solution. S3. Yeah.
I'll probably say maybe 5,000.
Ooh, okay. Not that big. Well, it gets to that level. So the first set of keys have about 200-300 different buckets, but each bucket has maybe 8. I think I'm trying to remember. We're around 2 terabytes of data that we now have access to.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to pull this on my local machine. I'm grabbing everything. I'm putting my VPS. I had to continuously up the storage for my VPS. One stage we actually lost access to a VPS because of overfill in storage. So we didn't make that mistake again, but it didn't really change much. We just lost a bit of time. So we downloaded 1.8 terabytes of all of this data. Right, we have permission to do this as a company. We're auditing to do this on. This is when I was speaking about a really wide scope in the previous episode. This is one of those cases where we're the red team. By any means, we will get a win. And so we download terabytes of data, and then we run tools like Trufflehog or Git Leaks. Git Leaks, and there's one more, Iron Pipe, I think it is, something like that.
Yeah.
And so what this does is it then scans all those files for more credentials. And from there, we found another 10 pairs of AWS credentials. And not even that, we found employee credentials and administrative credentials to their environments. So now we had access to 3 different environments, GitHub buckets. Now we have access to, I won't give it an exact number, but it was around 30 different environments. What happens to the main company they create a different environment for each one of these customers. Now I can't say the specific company, but the client we were working with, they're basically the backend systems for managing
redacted.
And each one of the environments is for a different
redacted.
So this is a lot of data and we have a lot of access that we shouldn't. And not only that, but we now have access to it was hundreds of thousands of logs, and even in those, there was just so much information. And so we now have complete and utter access to 30 different environments. And obviously, we don't actually have permission to touch the custom environments. Yeah. So, but just we knew the main ones for these guys, and so we had demonstrated potential impact, and we got I think it's IAM for AWS. I don't like it. Yeah,
I don't see
access.
Yeah, management. Yeah, and we had gone root on all environments for that through three domains, and then so we started looking. Okay, now we're hunting for heap dumps, and we scan using tools like Shodan and a bunch of other ones. Like we scan entire address spaces for like our products for assets that they didn't even know they existed, but we found about a total of 60 different servers that had this vulnerability.
Yeah,
and it just took me three servers to pwn 30 environments. When we did this, like this was two parts. So like that, the first, I'll call it leg, that took about 2-3 months of work. Like there was so much to sort through. It takes a long time to demonstrate impact, but that's the level that APTs play on.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing, right? Because the way that the media portrays hacking and, how it's shown in movies, you always... I'm in the I'm in the mainframe and it takes them 5 seconds and, they've got all this access, but in reality...
It's a long game.
It's a long game.
And that's even from you, like private company. Can you imagine, ABTs?
Absolutely. The way I look, like I'm okay. I'm no longer a teenager, but like I had the capacity to do this when I was a teen, right? But I wasn't working at a firm to do it. Didn't really have a point in doing it. But like the fact that some random kid could do the same thing I did is just such a terrifying prospect. Like you don't need to have maybe some fundamental level of understanding, but I'm seeing kids like pulling off, like for example, the last several kids that were arrested, like the Uber hack. I think that is some lapsus child, right?
Was that the one where Uber also got in trouble because they tried to do an under the table payment?
Oh, I didn't know that. No. Yeah. Right. He's the guy who did GTA 6 as well, the leak for that. Yeah. Right. I think he was with Lapsus. But he's some kid, right? But like all the ones, like it's funny, all the ones except this last Russian dude, all the hackers getting caught are just people who don't know how to not make noise. They like these kids were doing it from their home machines. They weren't even using a VPN. B, they weren't even using a VPS or a proxy service. Nothing. Like they were raw dogging it, if you don't mind me asking it.
I think it's partially because they just don't understand consequences.
That's true. He probably, I don't blame him. Like that's another funny story. I'll say when I was a little shit, like I didn't really understand the consequences of things I was doing. Like I was like, will this work? Oh, it does. Yeah. So when I was in high school, Max had a thing called, this is the one thing I got in trouble for. There's a thing called screen sharing.
Yeah.
Now, when we initially got our Macs, right, your username was your student ID.
Yeah.
Have to guess what your password was. Student ID. Yeah, just as bad. And so I was thinking, like, obviously, you'd think, like, people change their password, surely. No. Oh, my God. But it's also the school's fault for not mandating that policy. Now, you can go, since I could reach anyone on the network, if I couldn't do it to teachers, but you could do to any student that hadn't changed their laptop password, and this was for every year, and I can't even remember how many kids we had, but I could see a student ID, like, I would try it, and it would work, and then I would...
Expletive.
Correct. And I was a little shit, like, I didn't do too much, okay, well, I won't say the rest of the story on the podcast, maybe after, but a few blokes that I wasn't too happy with that were quite dickish to me, and so I made sure I got some level of vengeance. It was nice knowing that I could do something, and but that's the extent of that. I was a child then. For legal purposes, I was under the age of 16.
I'm going to take it a bit of a different direction. For people who kind of want to sort of get into penetrations testing and stuff like that, how important would you say the soft skills are? Not necessarily the technical skills, because I'm reading your report actually right now. It's well written. How much would you say that the report writing is important? The communication skills, how important is that in penetration testing?
I underestimated how much reporting I would be doing. Going into this, I was like, I care nothing but technical skills, technical knowledge. That's all I want. That's all I care about. That's all I thought I needed. I would say reporting is maybe like 30 to 40% of our job. It's actually one of the most time-consuming things. Like, yeah, you can spend 2 to 4 weeks testing and having fun and disassembling and annihilating some poor application. But at the end of the day, like, everything you did, I like documentation. I'm actually quite obsessed with documentation. Yeah. And so that comes in quite handy, but you need to... every request and every response we have to save and document, which is quite nice because it actually saved our asses once. Like, if you use Burp Suite Pro, you can save sessions and they're persistent. And so we save it for every like test we do. So what happened, there was like a particular endpoint that we had tested and we didn't find anything. It wasn't like any SQL issue. The customer came back to us and like, hey, like this endpoint was vulnerable to like SQL injection. Like, why didn't you find this? Like, no, we're 95% certain. We tested for that because that's one of the go-to tests. And they're like, well, do you have any proof? And thankfully, we had a Burp Suite session. We went back. We showed the endpoint that we had tested and scanned. Like, like here's the query. Like, exact same query. Well, I say the exact same, but like similar principle. Like, it's if it was vulnerable, the query we used would have worked and shown it. We then retested to see whether or not our query would have shown as vulnerable on the new app, and it was vulnerable on the later one. So it was good that we backed that up and documented it. But yes, reporting is super, super important, especially because we take it a step further. Like, we don't just tell the guys like, here are the issues we found.
It's remediation and stuff like that as well.
Yes, and so that's
the real value.
That's the last stretch, because the reason they bring you on is they don't have the expertise to do it themselves. So we take that's like the third and final. So there's like 3 stages, 4 I should say actually. Initial stages, like the most important I would say is like having a conversation like, what do you actually want out of this? Like, are you looking for just a few apps to be tested, an environment to be tested, or do you want to know whether or not you can be hacked? And so depending on what they want, we then build around the scope on that, yada yada. They give us access. Like, I know there's a whole conversation around like white box hacking, black box hacking, yada yada. But like, it saves us so much time. Like, if you want as much in like value for your money as you want, get a white box done. Like, it saves. We can hack you. We can spend months like harvesting emails and credentials, but we're gonna charge you for that. And so, we just ask for access outright, and then like, how granular do you want me to go with this? I can talk very, very granular if you like.
I mean, I think we get the point of it's not all just fun and games. Penetration testing, and like we've said before as well, you don't necessarily need a technical ability to work in cybersecurity. Obviously, it always helps, but you need the good writers and stuff like that, the good communicators. I'd say the soft skills are very important.
I would say it's an interesting like I feel like there's different disciplines, even with there's a lot of disciplines within cybersecurity. Like, I feel like
even at this table, I do like more so governance stuff. Highly technical penetration testing. Max is a little bit in between, but cloud specifically as well.
That's what I was going to say. Is there's 3 different disciplines right here.
I would say like all 3 are still like to some degree technical and like theoretical as well, if you will. And I feel like it depends on the kind of work you're doing. Like, if you want to get, it depends where you want to go. Gosh, even like within pen testing, there's so many like sub-disciplinaries. Like, do you want to do infrastructure? Do you want to do web application? Do you want to do cloud? Do you want to do network? Do you want to do API? Like, what do you want to do? Do you want to do reverse engineering? Like, each one is like still proper hacking, but different skill sets, different... Oh, sorry, go on.
No, that's right. So what I was going to say is it actually leads me into one. For our listeners that are really interested in what you're talking about and what you're saying and potentially want to start a career in pen testing, what are some of the basics they can do to learn a little bit of everything and put them on the path to gain knowledge to, become a pen tester? What are some things they can do? What are some strategies? What are some events they can go to? Well, what stuff can they do?
No, that's a good question. Like, okay, first off, like, depends on the hardware you have. Do you have if they have a laptop they're willing to spare, or a desktop where they're willing to partition? Like, my number one recommendation, regardless of people's skill sets or levels that they're at, is like just start getting used to using Linux.
Okay.
You will be using all things Linux. In fact, 80% of all the servers and sites that you interact with, like Netflix and Google, Gmail, everything, all that's running on Linux. Get used to that, because most systems you're going to be testing will be running on Linux or Unix or some embedded version of Linux. I mean, Windows is relevant and it's a good skill set to have, but initially just focus on Linux and start playing around. Like, my recommendation is I use it for a very, very long time as my daily driver. Like, I didn't use Windows, I didn't use Mac. All I use is Linux, and if you want to build up your knowledge, I did what's called distro hopping. Like every few months, I'll change Linux distros. There's like a Debian, there's Ubuntu, there's Kubuntu. Yeah, and it's actually really, really fun. Like there's so many different, like pull up like how many thousands of different Linux distros. And there's actually a nice tree that shows you like all the sub distros. Like there's, let me name some fun ones. There's Athena OS, there's Parrot OS, there's Kali Linux. I've already said Debian was good. Yeah,
below it.
Oh man, that's a funny story. For those who don't know, like Temple OS was made by a very intelligent person, but who had schizophrenia, and they designed Temple OS, which was built on an entire, it's like a religious Linux distro. 600 different Linux distros. Thank you for showing.
500 in active development.
That's insane. Red Hats.
Yeah, I used to do the same thing. I partitioned my drive when I was doing a more development role at Macquarie Uni. Weirdly enough, it wasn't on this laptop, it was my last one. I stopped using it because the boot drive just forgot Ubuntu existed.
Oh, no, that happens. Yeah.
But this laptop was a problem child. It forgot Windows existed like twice.
Yeah. So what happens when you install a new device after you've installed a different distro, like depending on your bootloader, you will lose the pointer for that. So that's happened to me constantly. So there's a cool bootloader that I love. It's called Grubhub. Use that. Like that's how you add partitions and pointers, and you can like configure. Like once you know what you're doing, it's really easy. But it takes a while to get up to that. If you're like intermediate and you want to break into the advanced, on your pursuit of mastery, I would recommend Arch Linux. And I know there's a funny. I don't know if you guys know about like there's like a whole gimmick regarding Arch Linux. It's very, very bare bones. Like you're given nothing but a terminal initially. Like
really,
you need to mount your drives, and once you mount your drives, then you can install your distro into it. Like you have to wipe it, partition it first, obviously, but then you have to install your own graphical environment or your display environment, there's your background environment as well, your everything. It's best way to, and you have to configure your network, all that by hand.
I know exactly who will love this. Flynn, who we've had on a couple times, will absolutely adore this. I'm gonna show it.
That's a bit of a Linux.
I actually despise it. So I'm a very big Linux advocate, but he keeps trying to get me to switch to Linux for gaming. The only thing with gaming in Linux is that I know that it's a lot easier nowadays, but when I'm going to play games, I'm trying to escape reality. I don't want to think about, it's not work, but like work-related stuff. I don't want to have to go in and git update everything, or git update APT.
Probably recommending Proton. Yeah, I've gamed like, it sucks because until the Steam Deck came out, like you could not game like AAA games like Rainbow Six Siege, or like you still can't, in fact, because of the anti-cheat. They haven't built a Linux kernel. They probably won't anytime soon. They had the original CS playable on Linux, but then CS2 came about and they dropped that, and I was heartbroken. But sorry, going back to your question, like, what would I do if what would I tell a beginner how to start, where to start? Like, hop and try hacking, hop and hack the box, hopping over the wire. Like, there's so many. Like, first, what interests you primarily? It makes it so much easier if you have a general idea of like what you want to learn, because then you can kind of like focalize on that specific subject. But I would start with going through Try Hack Me, seeing what concepts that you don't understand, and if you're already at a point where like you've been doing it for a while, you feel like you have an understanding of everything, and you're looking for the next level. Networking is probably one of my top recommendations, because I see like a lot of people are like well versed in networking, but it's one of those things that if you get good at, it separates you from the rest. Now, the next thing I'd recommend, and this might be a bit controversial because I've seen a lot in between, programming. And unfortunately, like if you want to script, like say you've just created some zero-day, right? Yeah. Or you've found some zero-day in a vendor application, and you want to spray or check to see how many people are vulnerable to tell them or show them or demonstrate impact. Like, you need to be able to write scripts on the it doesn't have to. You don't have to be a fantastic developer. Just be able to write scripts, or whether it's Bash script or Python or Java or C++, whatever it is. Like,
program something out of an idea.
Yeah, yes. I mean, every environment's a little bit different as well, right? So you got to be able to adjust and
absolutely.
That's a really good point, and it sort of resonates with me a bit. Once you get to a certain point with some programming languages, you start to think a little bit in the programming language, and when you get an idea, you're able to, you don't have to spend hours researching it. You can just kind of play and get it to work yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, getting to that stage in pen testing is a lot of
Yeah, a lot of bash scripting and a lot of Python.
Yeah. The Python is just too powerful.
Yeah. I gotta say, I regret starting with Python. It's just
So why?
yeah, man. Like, I've been
It's too much for you.
Yeah,
It gives you everything.
I'm trying to go low level, like learning assembly for like reverse engineering. Everyone uses tools like Gita or IDA to reverse a binary. Like, you need to know you need to know C++ and at least have beyond fundamental knowledge in assembly.
Yeah.
But like that's a different kind of hacking. That's a fun kind of hacking. Something I'm not too well versed in. But obviously, like, if you can only read Python, you're not going to get that. But I tutor people for like development, right? And so once you know about like 3 or 4 languages, like not even that, like if you've understood and you use a lot of language for a long enough time, you can pretty much pick up any other language because the concepts are the same. It's just different syntax.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of contention with development, but I feel like if you want to really like put yourself on the next level and offer ascend skill sets and like differentiate yourself from others, programming and networking will really help you make a case.
Just for our listeners, I think I'm actually a little bit in our listeners' shoes a little here. I've been trying to kind of rebuild my technical skill because my current role, although I do technical stuff and it's a lot of it's concepts, a lot of it's theoretical, sometimes I do miss out on, some of the more, tech savvy stuff of, the nitty gritty. And so something I've been doing recently is I've been, as Kirwin said, one of the things realized I want to do a lot of web application stuff. Something I've been going through is Port Twigger Academy. It's actually been very good. And it seems to be pretty good so far in terms of beginner and intermediate. And yeah, so that's something I've been enjoying. I would recommend our listeners check that out as well.
Absolutely. In fact, that's when we're learning like a specific attack, that is probably my number one recommendation. Like, as they give very sophisticated breakdowns on what the actual attack vector is, their theoretical knowledge behind it. They give you a little demo, and then they have an environment that you can spin up quite easily. It's like the top right, just click it. Yeah.
It's cool.
And then they let you attack it. Perfect recommendation. Back of Flynn here. If you're looking to learn, that's another fantastic resource, specifically for if you're using like Burp Suite as well. Those two pair perfectly well.
Burp Suite is such a good tool. Once you know how to use it, it's just so. Even we got fairly decent at it in uni, but I went back to it. I regret that I haven't used this in so long. I don't remember how to use it.
Thanks for listening. Just a reminder that the Cyber Minutes podcast is for educational purposes only. The views expressed by hosts and guests are their own, not necessarily their employers. Advice discussed is general advice. We promote ethical discussions, not illegal activities. Have a cybersecurity question? Send an email to cyberminutespodcast@gmail.com, as we'd love to answer it. Stay cyber safe.